Hello.
Hi, Janet.
Hi.
Hey, Janet.
How are you, Ken?
Doing okay. How are you today?
I'm good. I don't see my gallery choice here. Huh.
No, because it's going to be live stream on YouTube. So right now, the screen is the YouTube screen. Once we get started, it'll go back to our regular screen.
How are you feeling, Rebecca?
I'm feeling really good, thanks.
Excellent. Good. You look good. You look good.
Thank you.
You look like you're feeling a bit better.
Much better.
So how many more board members are you waiting on, Rebecca?
One more, don't we?
We need at least one more. I think, hold on. Nope. Nick is here.
Okay.
So like I said, I'm going to keep everybody muted. And then when they raise their hand, just like a select board meeting, then you can unmute them one by one.
Okay.
So if people are not board members, I'm gonna basically mute everybody now and you and Mari.
Okay.
Rebecca, you can hear me, right?
I can hear you.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you. Okay, very good.
Hey, Nick. Is Hillary back yet?
Not yet.
So you still have the option to unmute people, right, Rebecca?
No, it won't let me because the Barbara Brusnell is actually one of the members. That's Nick.
I'm going to hit record and then I'll make you the host and you can have all that.
Okay, thanks.
Rebecca, I have no idea why her name comes up and not me. This is my iPad. That's why there's no picture. I think she uses this for her own Zooms, and somehow or other this thing is programmed for her or something. I don't know. I'm not Barbara Brennesel, though. Hillary knows that, and I think you do too.
I do now. Yeah.
She has enough of her own meetings. She didn't want to sit down on this one too. Janet, are you there? Oh.
I am here, Nick. Can you hear me?
Yes, Janet. How you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Excellent. Excellent.
Good. Excellent. I'm glad to hear that, Nick.
So, Rebecca, you haven't heard from Jed or Gary at all?
Jed is here. Yep, I'm just going to unmute him.
All right.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay.
Hey, Jed, how are you?
Okay.
Good. Okay, well, now just waiting for Hillary to get back.
She's here.
Rebecca?
Yes.
Is the meeting open from the very beginning, or do we take care of business first, or what's up?
Now that
No, it's an open meeting.
From the very beginning. Yeah, okay.
So the way it works is that there's no chat group, there's no chat area. And what they'll do is if they want to make, like Hillary said at the beginning, she wants them each to read their own letter. So they'll raise their hand and then I'll unmute them so that they can read the letter that they've written to the Board of Health.
Okay.
So, but Rebecca, you said Hillary is back?
She is.
Right here.
She's good.
All right. Okay, well, let's get this meeting underway. So, where would everybody like to start? You want to start right off the bat?
Yeah, Mom.
Hillary, what are you thinking?
Yeah, I think we can start by taking in comments from the public. Our documents have been available for several weeks now on the town website. We've taken in a number of letters, and I think we want to hear from the public what their thoughts are, what their concerns are, what they think is good. And then we can take all that under advisement and talk as a board. But I think it's clear to everyone that there is a proposal on the table for a rental registration program. The registration program would apply to all rental units in the town of Wellfleet. So we're not differentiating between short-term rental and year-round rental. It would apply to all rental units in town. And I think with that, let's hear from the public. I think there's a lot of questions and concerns, and let's hear what folks have to say.
All right, Rebecca, So we're just going to announce that anybody who has written a letter to the Board of Health or anybody who has a comment, please raise your hand and let Rebecca know and identify yourself, and Rebecca will unmute you.
Okay, the first one I have is Matt Rosenberg. Let me unmute him. Go ahead, Matt.
Hi there. I will read a letter that I wrote. It'll probably take a couple of minutes because I went into a considerable amount of detail. And I thank you for the offer to read letters. I am a Wellfleet taxpayer. I depend on income from renting my home for a portion of the year. The COVID-19 crisis has hit everybody hard, no matter where they live. As a homeowner who rents, I'm deeply aware that keeping our guests safe is a paramount responsibility, and I'm in open communication with our guests about our plans for this unusual summer to keep everybody safe. I write with questions about the rental registry being proposed. I'm aware that Hillary has stated in public forums that first, there's no practical way to implement this proposal in time for this summer season. And second, that there are additional issues that the guidelines raise that have not yet been accounted for. It doesn't appear that the draft has changed since May 20th. If it has, then some of these may not be relevant. But it does appear that the board is rushing to adopt these regulations. One doesn't, after all, schedule a public hearing for the purpose of not adopting proposals. Homeowners with rentals have many questions and concerns about the proposal. It's unclear what specific problem or problems these regulations are intended to solve. And if they are merely rules made out of a general concern for safety, it would seem that a more deliberative, more complete, and less rushed approach would be the best course. None of my reservations come from a lack of concern for the health and safety of our guests and ourselves. Our reservations stem from the timing and the potential collateral consequences that the board may not have considered. Regarding timing, the state will enter phase 2 of the opening plan. That's already happened before the public hearing on these regulations. Because of the time of year, guests are poised to arrive shortly, and in fact, I'm sure there's plenty on their way right now. However, if these regulations go into effect, there may be significant discussions that are already signed and money already paid and spent, which brings me to the following questions. First, assuming all affected homeowners apply on the first day that it is possible to apply, what is the anticipated time between submission of an application and receipt of a certificate? What's the anticipated time between the beginning of the application period and the effective date of the rules? Is that enough time to process all of the anticipated applications and still deliver owners? Second, under the rules in the proposed draft, rentals appear to be prohibited until a certificate is obtained and posted in the home. However, there's no indication of the lag between application and receipt of the certificate, and no inkling of the answer to the first question above. If applications do not precede the effective date, there will surely be a period in which homeowners are in limbo and will not be able to rent, and this after the season has already started. This makes it impossible to manage a calendar of guests. Since there's no dependency, like inspections, for granting a certificate and everybody's being asked to self-certify, there doesn't appear to be a reason for this limbo period. Perhaps that's not your intention, but it's not clear that it's not your intention in the proposed draft. Could the application, could the submitted application form be posted as a provisional certificate? And if not, please explain why not, given that self-certification. Third, Hillary's referenced other issues that may stem from the proposed draft. I'd like to know what they are and what is the plan to address them if they've not been brought to light and discussed openly in the past. Hillary's also said that this is unrealistic to implement this summer. If the intention is to implement it this summer, why is her professional advice being ignored or overridden? 5, there are many open questions about who this will affect and how. For example, I believe it remains unknown how many homes are made available for rental each year and how those homes sort into various categories. It would be helpful to estimate how many homeowners would be deemed non-compliant if they were to be inspected, and whether those homeowners are disproportionately in a certain age, income, or resident status. At the moment, it appears that who this regulation helps and who it hurts are not part of the deliberations. Will they be? Should they be? 6, most rulemaking includes a phase-in approach to allow for a smooth transition to the new rules. This proposed draft does not include an effective date. What is the board planning regarding a phase-in plan or effective date? If effective immediately or in the midst of the high rental season, how is the board planning to handle rentals of any duration that are underway or subject to signed leases when the regulations go into effect? 7, rules generally have no requirements that are impossible, or should have no requirements that are impossible. But in Section 9, if in the discretion of the Board of Health, a certificate is suspended or revoked, the owner is made responsible for finding alternative housing for their tenants. Let's say a suspension happens on July 31st. At that time, it is virtually impossible to find alternative housing for weekly tenants. For weekly rentals, this seems like an additional punishment outside of the remedies that are outlined in Section 10. Is this requirement more appropriate for long-term rentals where a unit is deemed uninhabitable while a tenant is currently in the midst of a long-term lease? Do you really intend this to apply to short-term rentals equally? And if so, how do you intend to make this section remotely possible to achieve? Why should this rule supersede the rules governing individual lease agreements? And finally, on timing, for homes that are empty much of the year with owners at a distance, how much notice do you anticipate giving before inspections? I recognize that there's a requirement to have a local contact available, but many owners would prefer to be able to attend the inspection themselves as they're better able to answer questions about maintenance and repairs. A few items in collateral consequences, then I'll wrap it up. Rules have consequences that reach far beyond their intentions sometimes. Assuming that the only goal here is the safety of homes offered for rent, I'd like to enumerate some consequences to the town and the population that may not have been contextualized within the narrower safety debate. First, has the board considered that these rules appear to favor wealthy homeowners with larger, newer homes that more easily comply, and that they're likely to disadvantage people who may be more reliant on renters to provide necessary income to live? 2, if these regulations have the effect of drastically reducing the size of the rental market, has the board considered the consequences to the business community? Has the board considered the consequences of a mass selling or foreclosure of homes all at once on property values and on the perception of Wellfleet as a viable place to live? Has a cost-benefit analysis of any kind been done? And 3, are the revenues from the application fee sufficient to hire more inspectors? Given a ballpark of about 800 homes that this may apply to, and I'm only thinking about short-term rentals here, and the availability of about 250 working days a year, it would take over 3 years of inspecting one home a day to hit every applicant. That seems like a significant burden to add to a small department. As you've seen, I have not taken issue with the substance of the health rules, although I think you may want to revisit chronic dampness given the prevalence of dehumidifiers in Wellfleet's basements. I don't think they solve a real problem, but the issues I've noted above are about moving into a more regulated rental market with care, common sense, and respect for those to whom these new regulations will apply. Thank you very much. I'm sorry it took me so long to read that. I didn't know it was going to be, I didn't know it was going to be letters, so I'm long-winded. Thank you.
All right, Hillary, I have a question for you and with the board. Should we go take each one as we go, or wait till everybody has read their comments and then try to answer them in full at that time? Hillary?
I may have put her to sleep.
Possibly. Well, you definitely had a mouthful. We do have a lot of the answers for you. And the one thing that everybody needs to understand, this is a preliminary hearing. We're trying to work with some guidelines. More than likely, anything that we put forth today won't matter towards the end results because we have to start the process somewhere. And right now, this is where we are at this moment. Now, is Hillary back, Rebecca? Is she here?
She
I'm
is.
right here. I'm right here. I didn't go anywhere. I heard the whole letter. And I think what I would offer before folks start reading their letters and we don't have an effective date. So any comments towards an effective date should sort of be put on hold because the board has to consider when we would make this effective. So I don't think we've said formally at any point that this was going to be effective June of 2020. I think we're still trying to formulate the best possible regulation based on the health and safety of renters in the town of Wellfleet. So I don't think it's about making it effective, for this season. I think it's about getting the best possible regulation so we can make sure all of the units are up to the health and safety standards that are laid out before we move forward.
Agreed with that. Now, do you want to, the letter that we just received had a lot of points. Do you want to go down them? Maybe that'll answer some of the other letters that we have before us. Or do you want to hear some more before we make any discussions? Janet, Jed, Nick, that's all up to you too. So you can answer that one as well.
Okay, I'd like to speak, if I could. Janet Drohan to speak. Am I muted?
We got you
Can I
now,
speak?
Jed.
Okay, I'm not muted.
No.
I think it might be wise to at least address some of the issues that each letter holds as it happens, because we may answer questions from other persons who are concerned. First of all, I think that the whole board wants to thank everyone who came, who's here, and who has responded to us, because that's exactly what we were looking for. We were looking for the feedback from the community so that this draft of regulations for the health and safety of our community would be looked at and tailor-made for our needs at this time in the middle of COVID, et cetera, and get a timeline that would work for everyone so that we could have a major amount of compliance with the health and safety. So I think that's the first thing. And I think the board will decide if it's reasonable to start it even this year. But this is the preliminary, and the information from this regulation, by the by, comes from other local towns in the Outer Cape. And that was the model that we used to get the information to develop this draft for the purpose of getting feedback. There is nothing in stone in this regulation, in this proposed regulation, including fees, including the parameters, except those that really affect our wastewater and our water supply here at the Cape. That's the major concern of the Board of Health, to make sure that we always make decisions that are based on the welfare of that situation of our aquifer here in the Cape. So I would be comfortable addressing specific concerns with each letter, but that's up to the rest of the board.
Nick, Jed, do you have anything you want to comment upon?
Yeah, this is Nick Picarello. Can you hear me, Ken?
Yeah, we got you.
I just wanted to address, first of all, the gentleman who mentioned about the alternative housing, that's a very real issue, and I can understand that, as far as one of the proposals that we were making about finding alternative housing. That would be pretty near impossible. But right. I think, as Janet had alluded, we're pretty late to the table with this whole registration process. From my understanding, every town from Dennis to Provincetown has this already in place, with maybe the exception of Orleans. And I haven't heard of any detriment as far as the number of renters or anything like that. The gentleman had mentioned about the effect on the rental market. I haven't seen or heard of anything happening to any of those towns as far as a decrement in the rental market. And I think that the notion of trying to apply the standards, depending on the age of the home and all that, I think we have to have standards that apply to all the houses, and we can maybe mitigate along the way, but we can't have different levels of housing, whether it's a young house, an older house. I mean, it has to apply to everyone. And maybe there'll be some mitigating circumstances we can address individually. And then the other thing that I want to highlight
Nick, you still there? Technology is wonderful. All right, well, we'll wait till Nick comes back to us. Jed, do you have anything you'd like to comment upon what we've talked about so far?
I have a bunch of people with their hand raised if you want me to go down the list for you.
Yeah, might as well. Let's bring up somebody else and we'll go forward from there.
Okay, the next person is John Wolf. I'm going to unmute him now.
Good. Thank you.
Hi. Yeah, my concerns do not go to the issue you raised as something for later consideration. It's more a general concern, sort of based on the notion of a solution in search of a problem. Would you like me to read the letter I wrote?
Yeah, please do.
Okay. As a year-round resident of Wellfleet since 2009, I am, at age 68, self-employed in several capacities. I'm sole proprietor and technician of automatic machine company servicing restaurant equipment, refrigeration, etc. And I am also a self-employed oil heat technician. During the tourist season, I operate a sailing excursion service on the harbor. For 50 years, I've been a professional musician, and outside of the coronavirus pandemic, I used to and hopefully will function in that capacity. In addition, and in keeping with an Outer Cape tradition going back to the late 19th century, I rent out a small seasonal housekeeping or efficiency cabin on my property by way of, number one, helping reduce the high cost of maintaining a residence here by defraying my property tax and insurance expenses, and two, providing one of the diminishing number of vacation rentals affordable to those of modest means, such as artists, teachers, graduate students, interns, and persons on fixed incomes. Also in keeping with this rustic tradition, these rentals have been effected with a minimum of red tape and a maximum of trust and informality, which has always characterized life here, and which has always set it apart from much of the rest of America, from which many of us wash-ashores, like myself, came. This trust and informality has been rewarded by accommodations which have been enjoyed in a peaceful and trouble-free manner, though some, like mine, which was not decorated by Martha Stewart, are not the lap of luxury. They are redolent of a Cape Cod most of us would like to see preserved. Last year, Massachusetts joined a number, actually, I think I can skip that part. It just mentions the rental tax that we are now paying of nearly 12.5%. So be it. It is now an accomplished fact, but at least it is unaccompanied by unnecessary and intrusive rulemaking. Enter coronavirus. This pandemic, as we know, has thrown a large handful of sand into the gears, and up until Monday, brought short-term rentals to a standstill. They're now just beginning to reopen, at least legally. Some of us, myself included, voluntarily suspended short-term rentals even before the governor weighed in. Now we are able to carefully begin our rental season, observing the necessary sanitation protocols. After all, none of us wish to become ill or make others ill. Now, having dealt with a new excise tax and the economic ravages of a pandemic, our own Board of Health is seeking to impose what amounts to a solution in search of a problem, a requirement that we register our properties with the town after having done so with the Commonwealth, comply with a list of regulations, some of which our own residences might have trouble meeting, such as room size, be subject to an inspection, a duplicative effort, given that our properties had to pass an inspection in order to be occupied in the first place, and pay for the privilege. The reason, ? Well, the posting of the proposed regulation on the town website gave no reason. I have, however, seen on our community Facebook page some reasons propounded by 2 or 3 persons who appear to support this measure. One reason is that it would, quote unquote, protect the tenant. How is not explained. As the laws and codes now stand, as laid out in 105 CMR 400, any tenant encountering a hazardous, unsanitary, or otherwise problematic issue may contact the Board of Health and request an inspection. And the board, upon finding that the tenant's concerns are borne out, has wide latitude as to enforcement of remedies. Also, it goes without saying that it's in the interest of any property owner who wishes to continue successfully to rent out a room, cabin, or home to maintain it in a safe, clean, and sanitary condition. The protection of the tenant is in the interest of the owner and is guaranteed by the ability of the tenant to seek remedy as per existing regulation. Another reason, which one person in particular mentioned repeatedly, has to do with the, in my view, imaginary possibility of, quote unquote, overloading the septic system. This in particular is nonsense. You, as members of the Board of Health, are more aware than anyone of the requirement that a septic system be sized appropriately for the total number of bedrooms contained in any dwelling. This includes any outbuilding containing sleeping and bath facilities. Thus, for example, my home is equipped with a 5-bedroom Title V septic. Actually, the number of bedrooms, including my cabin, is 4. Most Outer Cape homeowners are well aware of what is likely to happen to any septic system which is overloaded with any regularity. It will fail and have to be replaced at tremendous expense. A third reason I saw mentioned a few times was, quote unquote, Provincetown, or fill in the blank other towns, has such a regulation. I cannot think of a worse reason than that to enact, simply because another town has done so. In particular, in the case of Provincetown, a town which has become so expensive that none but the very wealthy can even afford to vacation there, never mind live there. A town which once prided itself on its individuality and inclusiveness has now become an exclusive Cape Cod version of Nantucket or the Hamptons. Do we want to continue taking steps along that path? Another issue not mentioned in the proposal is the issue of staffing. How do you propose to administer this regulation, which I characterized as unnecessarily burdensome, with its requirements for inspections and extensive record keeping? Obviously, personnel would need to be hired. Given the power of the public employee unions, this would clearly entail not only a negotiated salary, but also ongoing benefits and yet another set of pension obligations. Has anyone considered the expenses this would entail or made any effort to calculate what those would be going forward? If so, no mention has been made of that rather key matter. One of the most endearing features of Outer Cape life has always been the informality, ease, and trust which characterizes our relationships, including our business relationships here. Sadly, little by little, we have seen too many people, supposedly drawn here by these features, try in some ways to remake our towns in the images of the places from which we came. Speaking for myself, I did not move here from St. Louis County, Missouri, to see Wellfleet remodeled into a seaside version, complete with bureaucracy, red tape, and accompanying expenses of that major suburban locale. As someone who spent summers here every one of my 68 years and whose parents summered here from the end of World War II and bought property here in the 1950s, I was drawn here by what is and what it represents. And frankly, I resent ongoing attempts to remake it in some other image. This proposal would, as far as I can tell, be of no net benefit to anyone. Not to property owners, not to tenants, not to those seeking an affordable vacation here, and certainly not to the town. Again, it is a solution in search of a problem which doesn't exist. If it does exist, it's news to many of us. And it's an unnecessary expense to property owners and the town and is unjustifiably intrusive.
Well, thank you for your letter. If it's okay with the board, I'm going to ask anybody else who next has a letter, please try to keep it a minimum of 5 minutes. I know we have a number of people here who would like to comment upon this, and there will be a discussion as well. Now, I can't answer all your questions, John, that you just had, but some of the things that you commented upon was like with the Title V. Do you know, I'm not absolutely sure, but I know there's probably between 500 to 1,000 cesspools still in town. That's one of the main concerns that the Board of Health has. And we can't worry ourselves about what could happen down the line on a regulation. We have to worry about what our prime concern is, which is the water for Wellfleet. We have, as everybody knows, you have the Herring River Cove. You got a lot of money being spent with that for the water quality. There are a lot of things that are going on right now. You could possibly have a sewer going in if the water quality in this town doesn't improve. You have the wastewater committees. There's a lot of different things that are being done at this time. And if we could enact something that could possibly, I'm saying just possibly, help with the water quality in certain areas of this town, I think we should go for it. Like if you're looking at somebody who's lived in a house for 50 years and they never had a problem with a septic system, but more than likely what could be in the ground is just a cesspool. And we don't know what could be in the ground unless we do an inspection or if the house is sold. So those are some of the concerns that we have going forward. Now, Hillary, I have one little question for you, if you're there. By any chance, would you know how many cesspools could be in this town at this moment? No. All right, well, we'll wait for Hillary. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Sorry, I do not know that number off the top of my head, but there are a considerable amount of cesspools still in town.
Could I speak to this?
Yeah, well, just real short. I want to get to the board.
Yeah, I'll make it very short. First of all, anybody replacing a septic system would have to pull a permit. That would be a town record. I know that the property my family owns, which they've owned since 1959, that system was replaced with a Title V system, and it is part of the town's records. And my own home, the septic system was replaced shortly before I purchased it, and that's part of the town records. I spoke extensively with one of the members of the wastewater committee on this specific issue. I was hoping he would be at the meeting, at this meeting. And if he is, I hope he speaks, because he has some very good information regarding the alleged contributions of our septic systems to the overall water quality issue. You spoke to if it could possibly help. Well, before we put a regulation like this in place, I would think we would want to make awfully sure that it's going to make a material difference.
Well, let me just comment upon that, John. We have not just jumped into this as a possibility. We have talked about this a little bit in the past, but we've never pulled the trigger. I don't want to be Truro, I don't want to be East Ham, I don't want to be Orleans, I want to be Wellfleet. But there are some guidelines and things that should be put forth that everybody uses the word fair. Now, everybody who rents a house, Airbnb, if they can do it, that's fine, that's their prerogative. But they have, being unfairly benefited by the location, but none of the expenses of being licensed. You have all the businesses in town, the motels, any guest houses that are going through the process of being licensed, paying the fees. Then you have somebody, maybe your neighbor, or whoever it could be, they rent out something where they don't have to take out the same licenses that maybe the next house over is a B&B is. So there are things that can be done both ways. But again, this is just a hearing to try to see where we want to go.
No, I
Now,
understand.
now, Janet, Jed, Nick, anybody else want to say anything?
I think I want to speak, Ken, Janet.
Go ahead, Janet.
Okay, I just want to say again, these are the guidelines that we are looking for feedback from. And I think that the basis of these guidelines, as I said, is in other towns, and it does not come from a Facebook page where people are commenting. Please know that. We have done our due diligence in assessing the appropriateness and the scientific value of these guidelines. And as far as gallons per day on a septic system, this is what we're asking the short-term renters and the long-term renters to say. This is the maximum occupancy that I have integrated into my business plan that is running my small business of short-term rental. That's all we're asking for, okay? So this is a question of gathering information about what we have in Wellfleet, how many short-term rentals, what the potential is for population from those short-term rentals, and how can we keep them safe? How can we keep the water that they drink safe? And really to really assist you in your business plan, which is to keep your people coming back again and again because they're happy coming here. So I think having a number on your house for the fire department, having a clear egress, having electrical panels labeled, having someone that can be called at 3 o'clock in the morning when the toilet is broken and the owner is not in town. These are all things that are very practical and applicable. And again, this is a draft. The date of implementation has not been decided. We're taking all the information we can get. And everything is looking for your response,
Okay.
including the fee. Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree. Nick, Jed, you have anything to say, comments? No. Okay. Nothing? All right, Rebecca,
I have Michael DeVasto raising his hand next.
okay, but
All right, I'm
please,
gonna-
let's keep it to 5 minutes, please. Thank you.
Okay, I'm gonna mute him. Hold on.
Hey, thank you.
Hey.
I'll keep it short. The one thing that I think statistics and gathering this information is important. I think compliance is important also. I'm a little bit apprehensive about this, not just about this being about seasonal and year-round rentals, given the housing crisis that we have in this town and the reality of our rental situation as far as people who are year-round and what the fallout from that could be. I mean, I think really short-term rentals are a different classification than a year-round rental or a seasonal rental. I think it could have a very detrimental effect, being that we have primarily single-family homes, and there are situations which may arise where somebody who's year-round in a sort of in-law type apartment unit that's whatever, I'm just saying, would be displaced by this, and that would be a perfectly legal Airbnb. And so I think that when you look at this and having year-round and seasonal with our workforce housing problems and our year-round housing problems, I think it would be appropriate to look at this as short-term rental, knowing how many short-term rentals we have, what our short-term rental capacity is. The self-certification is good. I would like to see, well, let's be honest about septic capacity too. It's septic capacity. It's not sleeping capacity. So you could have a house that's a 4-bedroom house but it may sleep 16 people. That probably not against the law.
Yeah, it is.
It is.
It is. It is.
It is.
What is the capacity? So what's the capacity of a 4-bedroom septic house, I guess, is
8.
you can only have 8 people in a 4-bedroom house?
Right.
Yes.
It's gallons per day in the septic.
2 occupants.
What if you have an 8-bedroom house and you have 8 kids? I mean, a 4-bedroom house and you have 8 kids. I'm not saying that happens very often. That's illegal. No, is that illegal to? Yeah, I thought we couldn't regulate how many people live in an occupancy, just how many bedrooms there are. So for short-term rentals, is what I'm saying. Is it different in that respect? But let me finish before I and then you guys can respond. I'd like to see the self-certification and rather than adding bureaucracy and fee, that the inspections are as required in Section 7 and where they're based on complaint. And then possibly random inspections. That way, the need to hire another individual and all the bureaucracy that goes around that not be necessary. And then the other issue that I have is the fees of $300. I know it's $100 a year for 3 years. I kind of feel like, especially if you're year-round renting, those fees should not be assessed. I don't think we should be dealing with year-round housing at all in this. And I think that, if there's going to be a fee, residents of the town who are struggling to live here should be subject to a lower fee than that. I think this is more about certification than anything, so that the town has some statistics and knows where rental units are and what the maximum occupancy of those rental units are. And then, dealing with complaints and inspections and random inspections is the way to move forward. So that's my 2 cents. That's all.
Okay, well, we have thrown around different things, possibility of doing self-certification where you're not being charged a fee for it. Truthfully, I think if you a lot of business, if you're a business, if you're a short-term rental, you already consider yourself a business, and if you don't put somebody in it as a long-term rental, you're separating. I don't like how you separate different things into different categories. If you're going to rent a house, you should be able to have it be certified that the property is qualified, even to be a year-round rental. Does anybody have a comment?
Can I weigh in for a second too, Ken? I just wanted to weigh in. I think it was important to the board that we didn't differentiate between short-term rental and year-round rental.
Right.
As far as health and safety standards and functionality of septic system and quality of water. So I think the basis for the public health reasons to move forward with the regulation actually warrant that we don't differentiate between different situations. There is room to maybe look at the fee schedule or alter the fee schedule, but I would hate to have us have 2 fee schedules for a year-round rental versus a short-term rental. So, I mean, I think what I'm gathering from the letters received, the $300 sounds too steep. That's fine. We can look at another fee structure for these things. And along those lines, I'll just read another comment that I got in from Ryan Curley, and he had a question, and he wondered if we could waive fees for those that rent on a yearly basis. So he asked the same question, and I think whatever fee structure we come up with should be fair across the board, short-term versus year-round rental. And perhaps we look at waiving fees for those that are offering affordable housing units or workforce housing units, along with looking at these other fees. So.
Okay. Janet, Nick?
Yep.
Any comments?
I just want to address Mike's situation about somebody who has 8 kids, okay? Nobody can tell anybody how many people live in a house. All we can do from a Board of Health perspective and from a septic safety perspective is say how many gallons per day a septic system must be able to handle based on the occupancy in bedrooms. It's not about even bathrooms, it's about bedrooms. And how many people are in that bedroom in your own private life is your business. However, if a rental has a 3-bedroom capacity and there's 16 people sleeping in it, that is going against the regulation. Okay, and we know that can happen, and we know that it does happen. Maybe not to 16, but we know that does happen. So what we're trying to do is maintain the safety of that existing septic system while the place is being rented.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would just agree that that's probably one of the critical points of this whole registration.
Yes.
When you consider we have a harbor that the federal government is mandating we try to clean up. Now, I understand, John, about the contribution of septics. It's still being analyzed. But that certainly at our last meeting, the intention was that we continue to put in as many alternative systems and get as much nitrogen out of our systems as possible. And I think in order to do that, we need to know what's going on with all these septic tanks and all these cesspools around town if we really want to contribute to cleaning up the harbor. And I think the other point I think that's critical is what Janet was saying about occupancy. We all know what happens during the summer. And I think if it's posted in the house, visible to those outside, that this house can occupy, legally, or the suggestion with the registrations that it has 8 occupants, I think it may be somewhat of a deterrent to that house all of a sudden having 12 and 16 over a long weekend or Labor Day, 4th of July, because that's an endemic problem in town during the summer. There are some towns that actually regulate this by checking septic systems before and after the season, because they know this happens considerably, and there is a documentation of septic overload that happens. So I think that's one of the critical points I would think about is just the septic systems, the occupancy, and the state of the harbor, which we have to clean up, or the feds are going to step in and it's going to cost us a fortune. That's all. Thanks.
Rebecca?
I have, oh yes, I have Briella is next. I'll unmute her.
All right. Go ahead. Thank you.
You're watching Investigation Discovery on Demand.
Can we just also have the folks identify if they wrote a letter in, because I want to take them out of my queue to read them. So if the folks let us know if they emailed a letter, that would be great.
I unmuted her and I don't know what happened to her.
Well, we can always come back.
Yep. Kathleen Bacon has her hand raised next. I'm going to unmute her.
All right. Thank you.
Go ahead, Kathleen. You should be unmuted. Hang on. There you go, Kathleen. You're all set.
Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me?
Mhm.
Yes, Kathleen.
Janet, Nick, Jed, Ken, Hillary, thank you for all the work you're doing. I'm in favor of a rental regulation. And this one is not boilerplate. It would be tailor-made to Wellfleet. So I think you're doing due diligence on that. But to further what you have spoken about, Nick in particular, Janet, and to the community at large that thinks another regulation is being shoved down their throat with yet another expense. This is a regulation that going forward for the town of Wellfleet would come back to us in spades. It's a regulation that, if done correctly, could get us much closer to being in compliance with a 208 plan. And the closer we get to that compliance, the closer we're going to get to having a watershed permit in our hand. And boy, It's all I want for Christmas. So for everyone out there, this is a regulation. It's obviously causing some angst and some fear, but ultimately, as our well-respected Board of Health members have spoken about, ultimately it's about water quality, our aquifer, and keeping our harbor and estuaries clean. And it also has another benefit, and it benefits someone that's renting without a smoke detector, without a carbon monoxide detector, or, maybe no plumbing. It's a benefit in that way. So I'm very supportive of going forward with this. And thank again to the Board of Health that's been working on this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kathleen. I suppose we could probably go right to the next one, Rebecca.
All right, I'm going to do Brielle one more time and see if I can get her to unmute.
There we go. Okay, I was trying to talk before. So this is, I apologize in advance. My daughter has been using my computer for homeschooling, and I couldn't quite figure out how to change the name. My name is Jeff Vecchio, 625 Old Wharf Road, Wellfleet. I did submit an email letter to the board this morning. I would just like to read that briefly. I won't take too much time. I apologize to my preceding people who already spoke, if I'm not as eloquent as some of them, but I did want to just briefly read a statement that I had. So myself and my wife would like to express our extreme displeasure and opposition to the proposed restrictions on short-term rentals this summer in Wellfleet or going forward at any point for that matter. I'm not quite sure, well, I mean, a little bit, but the fact that the Wellfleet Board of Health feels it's incumbent upon them to impose restrictions above and beyond what's already been levied at the state level, frankly, I find absurd. Has there not been enough economic damage to the state and local municipalities already? Why would anyone insist on furthering economic pain and suffering that so many small business owners have already endured? Small business owners meaning the owners of small rentals as well. The Cape and Wellfleet in particular are better off than many other parts of the state, in terms of kind of what's going on right now. And I don't know that this is directly related to COVID. It seems to be a lot of talk about septic and whatnot. I would say if it's COVID related, then there's very little basis in what's being discussed today. I think it would be a derelict of duty for anyone to insist on deviating from a broader plan already outlined by Governor Baker's administration in phased reopening. I think that some of the people who may be speaking or have certain opinions opposite to what a lot of other people do may not have skin in the game, and that means like they don't have rentals, don't know what it means to rely on that income. And I think there's a false sense of security just deterring tourism and further increasing the burden that many of the constituents in Wellfleet are facing right now by sanctioning the rental industry that not only do the renters depend, that people with rental homes depend on, but many other folks as well. I think it's just the tourism industry in general. Go talk to the owners of local restaurants, retail establishments, galleries, whoever, and see how they feel about single-handedly crushing, rental and tourism business. I think the two go hand in hand. And, if there are restrictions placed on what's being proposed, then yes, it will have a major impact on those operations. I think there should be no limitation on the amount of stays a day a renter can have. You either are allowing people to come vacation in the town or not. Increasing the minimum length of stay to 7, 14, 28 days or whatever is absolutely pointless. What's the basis of the science behind that? There isn't any. Anyone in a position of power should be promoting tourism and economic recovery right now, not prohibiting and deterring it by sanctioning our rentals. There's got to be some decency shown for those people who already have their homes booked for the summer and who depend on that rental income to survive and keep their very homes that are essentially being taken from them. Now, I know there was some discussion about this maybe not going into effect this summer. I mean, yeah, that's great to hear. But, you know, I don't know that that really is going to help a lot of folks going forward. Furthermore, the big brothering proposal in front of the board right now to babysit rental owners is absurd. You know, this isn't a college town, and strict oversight of rentals, seasonal or otherwise, is not needed, but really a complete waste of time and resources. Boston doesn't even have this degree of oversight, rules, and regulations with their inspectional services division governing rentals despite its countless slumlords. Wellfleet is comprised of 99% responsible, capable, and honest rental property owners. I think it's shameful that the town is proposing legislation to just tag their constituents with excess fees for no apparent reason. These same hardworking people have already paid their rental registration fees to the state of Massachusetts. The fact that Wellfleet should feel like they can double dip and hit these people with its own separate set of fees on top of those already levered by the state, I think is shameful. And the fees don't stop there. You're making unit owners incur additional costs with unnecessary Title V septic inspection reports and potable water test results. These are things that are normally reserved for the sale of homes, not the rental of homes. Certain individuals, I think, are just, you know, maybe with good intentions, but overstepping their bounds of authority and trying to develop, you know, these standards. Unnecessary inspections, I believe, are also an invasion of privacy in people's homes. And, you know, in regards to the other point, if you are not making any differential with short-term rentals and long-term rentals, then where is the additional strain on septic systems and effect on water quality? What's the difference of 4 people in a 2-bedroom house for either a weekly basis or 12 months or in perpetuity seasonally? In theory, the load would be the same if the occupancy was the same. Okay, so 2 people, whether they're there for a week, are going to use the same amount of resources as 2 people who live there year round. So, you know, I think this is unfortunate. We're trying to tie this into septic and water quality issues and everything else. I mean, I just think it's getting way off track and going way off the rails. And, you know, I mean, 800 some odd rentals in a town of how many houses? That's a huge percentage of people who are going to be negatively impacted by this. So,
well, thank you, but I got to stop there. Well, one of the things is we're not talking anything about weekly rentals or non-weekly rentals. Truthfully, you know, my prior business, that's all I did. I was hospitality and dealing with rentals. You know, you didn't get a state license, you got a town license. Once you start renting your house as you're trying to make money, you're becoming a business. You should be licensed. Just protect you, protect the people that are there. You should have the proper insurance. There are so many things that else go with when you decide you want to rent your house. There's so many other options.
Yeah, we're all registered by the state, sir.
I know exactly what it was involved with it before. But Hillary, do you want to comment upon any of this, please? Nick, Jed?
Ken?
I wanted to comment for a second. This is Hillary.
Thank you.
Sorry, I was muted. But another value in our local registration program is that we would have your contact information, such as a phone and an email address, because we get complaints all the time about rentals, and we have to do our due diligence and follow up on all of those complaints. And many times, by the time we would write you a letter about a complaint, it's water under the bridge. So having that contact information is very important to us. So just so people are aware, we do get complaints. We got one you know, just the other day about a property that was being rented during the governor's ban, for instance, and all we can do is go out and drive by. The complaint alleged that there were 5 cars parked on the road. There were 3 cars parked in the driveway. They were obviously hosting an event, and there's nothing we can do but drive by. So if we could have placed a call to the property owner, that would have been helpful to us in following up on the complaint. So that's another reason why a registration program is important.
Well, why do we need to create pages? Why do we not need to create? Okay.
Nick, you got something?
I was just going to say to the gentleman's, it was wishful thinking, I think, but I'd like to agree with him that 99% of renters are on board with with proper behavior, so to speak. But the Board of Health knows very little, I think, about what's going on. We know some things, and we just need more information about who's doing what and where they're doing it. And so I think, it's nice to believe that everyone's on the up and up. I'm not a skeptic, but I think the board needs just more information about what's going on in town.
I just don't think we need pages of legislation and a bunch of red tape just to get owners' contact.
Well, this is just a registration. Well, no, it's just a basic registration, and it really isn't nothing to do with COVID. It was a basic rental registration form, which is available. I mean, every town is doing this. We're just kind of late to the table, so to speak. I think maybe Orleans isn't, but everywhere from Dennis through Provincetown, this has been in place already. And we're just kind of, as Janet said, we kind of just went through some of their.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the contact information can be solved very easily, but I know there's other reasons too, but just kind of an extreme proposal to try to get someone's contact information, but go ahead.
All right, Janet, Ed, anything? If not, Rebecca, you can move on to the next person.
Move on.
I have Eric Wagner. I'm going to unmute him. Eric, you should be.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
All right. Yeah, this is Erica Wagner. We own the Wagner at Duck Creek, formerly the Inn at Duck Creek, and we own a number of vacation rentals and a personal residence in Wellfleet as well. And I concur with my colleagues who are opposed to this. I also don't agree that this is enacted in every proximate town. I think that's not a true statement. And I think we should be careful about saying things that aren't true. My general question, I think that really hasn't been addressed yet, is that if the real concern is for the quality of Wellfleet water, which we similarly want to be or are concerned about, why isn't this something that's considered for all residents? Never mind, rentals of whatever kind. If this is truly a concern from the Board of Health, then why is every resident not in scope to be evaluated in this capacity? And I did not write a letter, so I'm raising my hand, offering this question now.
Well, I'll answer this one a little quickly, then maybe Hillary, you can jump into it. We would like to, but it's illegal for us to be. We're not federal police. The only thing we can do is when we only can find out about a septic system when it's sold, or we're called out if there's a problem, or if it can be installed. If you start renting the properties, that's when we can get more involved with what's in the ground. If you're just a regular homeowner, the only way we can know what's in the ground legally at this time is when it's put in the ground or when you sell the property, nowhere in between.
Might be a little bit flashy for you.
Comment any more on that, please?
Despite her smiles for the camera, Charla's had enough of Darren's fantasies. And soon, it's true.
Hang on 1 second. Let me see.
Do recommend a water test once a year. That's in our standard language when we talk to people. And we do get water tests submitted upon certificates of occupancy, septic inspections, septic installation, and most building permits also we get a water test in upon their certificates.
I hope that helped you a little bit. Anybody else? Or Rebecca, you can go on to the next person.
Okay, next is Taylor Brickhead. I'm going to unmute you.
Oh, hi. Okay, I see that I'm on. I just have a couple of general comments. This will be very quick. If I could, I would nominate John Wolf to be on the board. He sounds like a very practical person and sounds like he would address issues from a very practical standpoint. Love that. Also, like the other person who spoke, whose name wasn't on the list, he seemed to have his finger on the pulse of things. I'm love Wellfleet, been summering in Wellfleet for a long time. It's a great place. As you add regulations, it's going to make it tougher and tougher, as is already happening, to be able to either live there or rent there or to hire people to work there. So minimize the regulations. Last I checked, this was still a free country, and let's see if we can keep it that way. If we have 95% of the residents are behaving very well, that's great. I don't know that we need to call in the feds, quote unquote, because somebody is parking cars because they violated some regulation that probably doesn't affect much, if anything. So when I hear people say that we're not going to do this for a little while, you don't have to worry about it, I'm reminded of that quote, I'm from the federal government and we're here to help you. That makes me want to get very concerned about things. From the water quality standpoint, it sounds like it's in reasonably good shape from a regulation standpoint. You can work on the regulations there a little bit so that maybe after 50 years or whatever the proper time frame is, if a house hasn't changed hands, you could go in and do a water inspection. But there's no need to generate a bunch of regulations on rentals or numerous other things in order to be able to make sure that that the water quality is not suffering. That's it.
Okay.
Does anybody from the board want to comment upon that?
Yep.
Nick? No. All right. Rebecca, you can move right along, I guess.
All right, I have Jamie and then I have Kurt Felix. Hang on one sec.
All right, why don't we take them for both right in a row?
Got it. Go ahead, Jamie. You should be unmuted.
Yeah, just we did a couple things. Homeowner here in Wellfleet, and I do rent mine out, and I want to play by whatever rules we need to play by. One thing, can we agree to not do anything this year? You keep saying we don't have a date. We don't have a date. Can we say, no, we're not doing anything this year? And that's one point. Another point is, say I got 10 people here. I don't know. I believe it qualifies. I got a pretty big situation, but 10 people times 70 days is the equivalent of 2 people for 365 days. So do we get a credit if the house is empty in off-season areas? On the septic, on the water use, things of that nature. And I'm not trying to be flip. I just know that I don't use a lot of water. I don't use a lot of septic as a whole. I come down as often as I can. I live at an hour from here, but I'm not here as much as I would love to be. I'm not fortunate in that category, but I'm here as much as I can be. But I know that I don't drain the resources. I give more than I take, I feel. Those are my 2 overlying questions. Yes. I guess I don't answer that question. Sorry, Hillary. I saw you raise your hand. All of a sudden, it's my meeting.
Go ahead, Rebecca.
Next is Kurt Felix. Go ahead, Kurt. You should be unmuted.
Yeah, I think Hillary wanted to respond on the last comment.
Okay. Hold on, Hillary.
All right.
Just a quick comment on the sort of amassing your stay in 1 month and then spreading that out over the year. We actually brought that up at a meeting we had with DEP when we were talking about our larger wastewater planning, and they made it quite clear to us that it's by day, so we can't sort of use that and then spread it out over multiple days. So the same would hold true on, Title V.
Okay. Bring Kurt up. 5 minutes.
Am I unmuted?
Yep, go ahead.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I just wanted to make a couple of comments. First of all, I think, this is a very difficult thing for the board to be engaged in because, obviously there's some needs in terms of getting information and having registration information, being able to contact people, being able to solve problems that may be coming up for town staff in dealing with our very busy vacation season. So, I applaud the intent of what the board's trying to do here. I do have a couple of comments. I think, first of all, in terms of the wastewater component of this, the short-term rental tax was passed specifically to address water and wastewater issues. In other words, the tax itself is in part distributed to the state, in part distributed to the town. The town's portion of this short-term rental tax could amount to somewhere nearing about $1 million a year. That was the estimate provided by the Cape Cod Commission when they were considering the legislation in the first place. So that represents about 5%.
Why did I lose this again?
Breaking up.
No, it's not you. Kurt broke up.
Okay.
All right, I'll go on to Helen Miranda Wilson, and then when Kurt comes back, we'll let him finish. All right. Helen, you should be done. You should be unmuted.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So two pieces of information, and Hillary, correct me if I'm wrong, but you and I know that I'm not wrong when I say that the reason the DEP doesn't let you, say, store credits for time unused by a septic system is that not only can the septic system be overwhelmed at any point by overuse, and remember, it isn't just waste we put in there, it's all our detergents and our sanitizing liquids and so forth. It can overwhelm the septic system. But that isn't the main reason you can't spread your credits around, meaning you use it a lot and then you don't use it. It's because you need to keep the biomat, the digestive area under and around a septic system going a little bit all year. When you don't use it, getting it back up to speed, like the digestive tract it is actually kind of a delicate operation. And it's particularly of concern with homes or with businesses that have a huge amount of use. The other thing is, I want to get back to what Janet Drowan said at the beginning, and also Nick touched on it. Most of the people in town have private water wells. I do, and I treasure it. I treasure it because municipal water, no matter how well the system is managed, and there's every effort made to manage our system well, is extremely expensive, has to be flushed with chlorine regularly, can be put on having to have it be disinfected all the time if it goes past a certain point. I'm trying to put this in layman's terms. And our water wells are extremely precious to us because of that, and also because we have great water. And if you're overusing or misusing your septic system, you can really damage your own well or damage your neighbor's well. And we want to do everything we can to prevent that. And simply knowing what the use of a particular lot is in terms of wastewater is very valuable locally, not just by the state. Now, I have a question, Ken, through you to Hillary.
Go ahead.
Is it not true that the units that are used by businesses to house their workers there are quite a few of them, and they're owned typically or rented by the businesses, let's say a restaurant for their workers, because that's always hard to find places to live, and a lot of them aren't local. And there can be overcrowding there. And those units, in my mind, should be absolutely monitored and known about in terms of population, because the people that come, particularly from other countries, they have no voice here, and they often live, as I know from firsthand information, in terrible situations here. So that's a question to Hillary, and would these kinds of units not also be included in this type of registration, or are they already?
Hillary?
I think she had to take a little one to the bathroom. Hang on one sec.
Yeah. Well, Helen, I'll just jump at it for a second. I would imagine they have to be monitored, just like everybody else.
I would too. Yeah.
No, but are they registered as renting or using those units as such? That's my point. In other words, I've known of different units like that have, say, 3 bedrooms, and they have way more people in there.
Right now, again, we are at the beginning stages of trying to figure this out. Right now it's June 10th. We're having our first meeting. More than likely, we'll have at least 1, maybe 2 more meetings. None of this will probably be happening this year at all. Right. Hopefully, everything will be working out. We'll work through the minutia that we're going through right now and get everything finalized to hopefully try to implement something for the spring of next year. Maybe people could get pre-registered so they don't have to go to the madhouse at the beginning of next year. It could be even 2 years from now. I don't know, but right now, we're just trying to throw stuff against the wall, see what sticks and where to go. All right. Rebecca, you go right ahead.
All right. I have Pam, then Maria, Kurt, and then Jamie. Go ahead, Pam. You should be unmuted.
Yep. I would like to defer back to Kurt to let him finish what he was saying, because I think we've been waiting. If he wants to do that.
I'm sorry, I did not hear that.
She just wanted to have Kurt finish what he was saying, and he's back on, so I can do that. Go ahead, Kurt. You're unmuted.
Yeah, I don't know what happened with the technology there. Sorry about that. So anyway, the short-term rental tax is a source of revenue for the town that's designed to help not only with water quality issues, but also septic issues. It's not a lot of money compared to the overall size of the problem, but I do think there's an equity issue here relative to trying to put a large burden on short-term rentals to fix the wastewater problem in the town of Wellfleet. I think it's, clearly there's a component there. The contribution from septic systems is relatively small. We have other sources, for example, restaurants have large septic systems that are getting heavily taxed during the summer months, during our vacation season and our tourist season. There's a number of other sources of septic that are not related to short-term rentals, including residents, that are all part of that peak. So as Hillary said, the DEP looks at this as a peak problem. So depending on what your peak loads are, that's really what you've got to be looking at. But overall, we've got a set of strategies around wastewater that are designed to deal with this problem effectively. The short-term rental situation, our vacation, our summer tourist season, that's something that's been a component of our town for the last 250 years. So the idea that it's suddenly a large component or a large part of the problem, I think, is potentially a little bit misplaced. And when septics account for maybe 5 to 10% of the overall problem, I think looking at Title V changes that would allow us to use advanced technology to change the leach fields, which helps not only with nitrogen, but also with personal care compounds and other kinds of chemicals that Helen alluded to that people flush down their toilets or get into the water stream. Those kind of technologies would actually help significantly deal with personal care products, for example. So there are a number of other things that are in the works that I think are going to be far more effective, far less costly. And I think there is, I think the board should really consider the equity issue here in terms of how much you want to pile on short-term rentals or even rentals in general, as opposed to the broader context of what the wastewater problem is all about and what is ultimately endemic in some of those solutions and strategies that will help protect our watershed, help protect our wells. Those are the kind of things that I think are very cost effective, are less burdensome potentially to some of our short-term rental people and our homeowners in general. So I applaud the effort. I think there's merit in what the board is doing. I would caution the extent to which you reach with the regulations and think seriously about what's really necessary and what's going to be in the best interests of both residents and short-term renters, as well as the watershed, as well as the aquifer, as well as our wastewater problem, and think about it in its context. Thank you.
Yeah. I'm going to just comment a little bit on that. In my past life, I ran a motel. We hated every single person that had an Airbnb, rented their house because they were unfairly favored for businesses. We had to go through licensing. We had to pay the taxes. How many people do you know that had a short-term rental before all this with the wastewater came into effect, where they just took the money, they didn't pay taxes? The businesses in town are unfairly handicapped by all the Airbnbs, the short-term rentals that are not registered and not regulated. We are not trying to solve the wastewater problem in town by having businesses register. We're trying to save your neighbor's house. You may have somebody who rents their house and they just have a cesspool. That system should be updated, or they should not rent out to rentals. It's simple as that to me. Does anybody else from the board want to comment?
Yes, I'd like to speak.
Go ahead, Janet.
If I could. First of all, thanks, Kurt, for your information on this. But I do think that we need to look at, number one, how many short-term rental units do we have in the 2-month period? I don't think anybody knows that. We've gotten some preliminary data, and I think it would knock your socks off how many people are here. And I also think that the short-term rental tax that's being paid to improve our wastewater situation is being earmarked for many, many things. And our fee cannot compare to the 12.5% that we're looking at in the state. And the fee hasn't even been decided upon, and will be. We will listen to the town, and we will make an appropriate decision on that. But I think that we have to start somewhere. And by as Ken has already said, we have an appropriate methodology of at least cleaning up our short-term rental as far as our wastewater goes and as far as our septic situation goes. And that's what I have to say. So I think that's separate from the taxes that are being placed on short-term rentals by the state. This is a separate thing for Wellfleet. It is not an overwhelming burden, and it will not be an overwhelming burden financially. We will do everything in our power so that it does not become an overwhelming burden. Thank you.
Nick, do you got anything to say, Jed?
Can I just ask Hillary a question, Ken?
Sure.
Hillary, are you aware of Provincetown, Truro, and Eastham having these rental registrations in place?
Yes, they all have a rental registration program in place.
And are you aware of Yarmouth and Brewster and Dennis, by any chance?
Dennis has a program. Yarmouth has a program. I am unaware of Brewster.
Well, I just want to clarify that the woman before saying that I mentioned these things and it wasn't true. I just want to clarify that for the record, because all those places do have rental registrations. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And I just want to throw it out there to people. We haven't decided on any fee. There may not be any fee. We just may ask for self-certification. If you decide that you want to rent your property out, there are just a few things that you would have to go through to get to that point. You may not have to pay a fee, but you may have to have your water tested and to make sure that your septic system is up to code. That's it. We're not going any further than that right this moment. We're just trying to find out information and to move forward. Rebecca, who's next?
I have Maria. I'm going to unmute her.
And I'll be right back. I'll listen though.
Go ahead, Maria. You should be unmuted.
Hi. Thank you for doing all this information, but I think adding additional regulation is totally ridiculous. You should have a vote on it. All I know is that, first of all, the water was taken away from my property by you putting in that big well down the road. So now I have less water pressure. Next thing I know, there's a farm going in, which could also hurt my water. And I wasn't even notified about it. Third of all, I do know that it's unnecessary as far as it's an invasion of my privacy. Also, you guys decided that you weren't going to plow my road until we fixed that. So now we have an additional fee for some kind of association, which I didn't want. And I don't want to get into that, but I have to. It's additional and additional constantly, and then money going out and nothing coming in. I mean, there's less people that rent. Plus, if you want to find out exactly how many people rent, all you have to do is call up Airbnb and call up VRBO, and they'll tell you how many people from Wellfleet rent. It's just way too many fees, way too much regulation. When I first bought in Wellfleet, it was a nice town. Now the taxes just keep going up, and that's it. It's constantly money going out and no help from anybody.
I missed part of the conversation. Does somebody want to comment, please?
No. There's no comment.
I do know one thing. I heard that with the plowing, that's a DPW issue. There's nothing we can do about that. All right, Rebecca, move it along.
All right, I have Jamie again on. Oh, let me unmute. Go ahead, Jamie, you should be unmuted.
Actually, this is Jeff Vecchio, AKA Briella.
Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Just in a quick response to Kenneth, he seemed like a nice guy. I don't know him, but I mean, I think you kind of showed your hand a little bit by carrying some negative baggage from your previous industry that you referenced a couple of times. I don't know why we're bringing that into the discussion. Everyone who owns
these things are terrible.
Everybody who owns rental properties now pays the taxes, so we're on an even board. But I mean, I think you should recuse yourself from anything having to do with this matter, because you obviously have an axe to grind against single-family rental property owners based on your previous experience. I mean, I don't think that's productive to bring that to the table, with all due respect.
Well, thank you. I'll take it under advisement. Thank you. Anybody else, Rebecca?
Yes. I have Kurt Felix again.
Okay, here we go.
Go ahead, Kurt.
I just think if there's, if you're going to include within the regulations something around water tests and septic inspections and that sort of thing, the idea of doing that annually probably doesn't make much sense in Wellfleet, based on, the period of time that that systems typically need to be tested. We already know a lot about the water quality in various areas to know who is well water may have some issues, whether that's relative to nitrates, whether that's relative to sodium. We have some pretty good data on that. So, there's a way to focus water tests in areas where we have known problems. And the period of time should really be considered, I think, based on some science. I don't honestly know how to go about that, but an annual inspection really doesn't make sense. And what period of time does make sense, I think, needs some serious consideration if you're going to include something like that in the regulations. Thank you.
Ken, can I address that?
Yeah, please go right ahead, Janet.
The proposed regulation proposes that the period of being looked at is 3 years for the water test and the septic. It's not annually, it's every 3 years. Kurt, just FYI.
Yeah, but that's not based on science. I'm saying it needs to be based on science.
Well, it's not every year, so maybe Hillary could answer that.
Anybody else, Rebecca?
I was going to take a go.
Go ahead. I'm sorry,
The 3 years was actually based on the time that the septic inspection report is good or valid for. So that was the 3-year time. And the water test, ironically, water tests can change day to day, month to month. So, 3 years probably isn't often enough for a water test, just because it does range that greatly from time to time.
I guess it wasn't that.
Okay. Anybody else, Rebecca?
Yep, I have one new one, and then I have other people that are wanting to talk, but hold on.
Okay.
Nick has something to say. Nick, you should be, oh, hang on.
You get me? No?
Yep, you're good. Go ahead.
Okay. Kurt, I was just going to say, as far as science, and I assume the state looked into this, but they recommend actually we should be pumping septic systems out every 3 years. I mean, we don't do anything near that, but just as far as some science behind it, I could probably find the details on why they recommend that, but that's for an average use, which, and we're actually thinking about updating some of our own guidelines as far as septic systems being pumped out, but that's another story for another day. Okay.
Okay, I have Kurt Limback, and then the others are raising their hand that have already spoken. That's up to you if you want to listen. Hang on one sec.
Unless they're bringing something new or fresh to the table, I'd rather not. If people say they are, that's fine. But if we're going to be rehashing the same thing, we should probably keep moving this conversation on.
All right, go ahead, Kurt. You should be unmuted. Yep. I just unmuted him. I don't know where he went.
Hi,
Okay,
can you hear?
Kurt. Yep, go ahead.
Burton, Matt. Hi, this is Matthew Limbach with my parents, Kurt and Deborah. To me, it seems like we're kind of putting the cart before the horse here. It seems a little strange to me to be introducing regulation in service of a fact-finding mission. I really feel like we should be getting all the facts and the scope of what we're looking at before regulation is introduced. And you forgive my ignorance here. We're not full-time residents. I don't follow every single meeting, but the board really hasn't outlined specifically what wastewater problems we are looking to address, in order by implementing these regulations. It's not clear. The documents that were provided on the website don't go into great detail at all about what specifically, especially in terms of the septic issues, what problems we're facing and how those issues can be addressed through regulation.
Yes, and I'd also like to add a couple of comments. Heard from some other people that people that rent out their weekly houses for rental, there's a problem with extra people overloading on a holiday or that kind of thing. And it could be the exact same situation for somebody who owns their home, either lives here year round or comes down here part-time. They could have 15 relatives come down on the 4th of July weekend. So to aim specifically at weekly rentals. And then we also heard from the one gentleman that we don't pay taxes. I pay over $11,000 a year for a 3-bedroom house here in Wellfleet in taxes. And part of my ability to pay these taxes comes from my ability to be able to rent my property out to weekly rentals. I'd love to be able to afford to be here all summer, but I can get my 2 weeks in a year with great difficulty. And obviously we're just hit very hard with the 12% tax by the state. I also want to make the comment that no homeowner, whether they rent out their house or live there around or rent it for a year, wants their septic to have issues or be overloaded. You will find out about it very quickly if you overload your septic system from whatever's in your house, and you will pay lots of money. We, as a matter of course, here, we pump out our system every 3 years just to play it safe, so we don't have issues. So those are just some of my comments. And then also, if this isn't a time of the essence because of COVID, to have this legislation or regulation adopted this year, why are we having meetings which are so difficult to participate in, hard to hear, hard for people to participate in who are not good with technology, using Zoom? I'm lucky to have my son here with me, and otherwise I wouldn't be able to hear and see what you folks are saying. And why couldn't this matter wait till we can have regular meeting where everybody can be together and participate and answer questions? Also, I thought it was a very good point was made about businesses like restaurants, the golf course, that has weddings down here or whatever, the fact that they're overloading the septic system. And I also would agree that I think that people that you're using part of their property as a barracks for many workers has the most potential to overload the system in the ground. So those are my comments. I appreciate the board giving us the opportunity to talk to you about it. But it would be nice if we could have a regular meeting in the future before these regulations ever adopted, so that we could have full participation from the community in something that's such an important part of a big change in the community. Thank you very much.
Not a big change, just getting a registration.
Not much. What's going on?
Anybody want to comment? Nick, Janet, Jed, Hillary? Okay. All right, Rebecca, anybody else? Oh, well, the people. So.
Me. Yep. I have Michael DeVasco again.
You got the Tommy Jacobs is looking to talk. You see her?
I have Helen Miranda Wilson, Pam Grandin, Jason, John, and Jamie next.
Good.
You might want to follow.
I just unmuted Mike DeVasto.
So 2 more sentences, just based on what it seems like the goals are for the Board of Health, as far as gathering information, knowing where the rental properties are, having the water test and proof of Title V. It seems like the simplest solution, and keeping it as simple as possible and having maximum compliance and the least resistance, is just to have a self-certification with no fee, and a water test and proof of Title V every 3 years, subject to inspection from complaints, as is currently the system, and then tie the certification to visitor beach stickers. That way, people certify. But because there's no fee and it's a self-certification, I think you'd have the most compliance and the least resistance, and really simplify the process. So that's my last 2 cents, I promised.
Well, thank you. That's what the board has already been discussing. We've talked to anything that deals with the Board of Health or with water quality should make it be enforceable, should be tied, which is one of our strongest things that we have is the beach sticker for the summer months. So, Rebecca, or anybody else?
I have Jamie. I'm going to unmute and lower. Go ahead, Jamie.
Yeah, real quick, it's me again. So I get it, and I'm not opposed to it. When I pull a building permit, that opens my house up to more scrutiny than if I never pulled one at all. So I get it. I'm renting my house out. I'm open to this. I agreed to it when I'm paying the taxes. So I'm not fighting the fact that we should do it. It might actually help me out. I don't know. It depends. My house is in good, clean order, and I remodeled it recently. So I feel good on what I might have to pass. But my ask again, and then also a timeline, can we agree to push this season? Because I got renters in limbo. I was on the meeting last night for 4 hours. Helen, I know a lot of you guys were all on that. Like, I don't know what to tell my tenants. And next year, we start trying to get renters, and a lot of Wellfleet renters repeat each and every year. So if I think I'm at 10 and you guys tell me I got to be at 8, I need to know that like November, December, because I need to re-advertise who my clientele would be. And so can we keep flirting with it might not be this year. Can we say it's not this season? And can we then, when we do implement it, try to implement it in time so that we can try to follow the rules? Because my goal is to always follow the rules. So if I find out next May that my house is not a 10, it's an 8, I got to go back to everybody and say, sorry, you can't come. And that's okay. Bad for me, but it's also bad for the taxes that the town gets. It's bad for the, businesses where they spend the money. It's bad for the beach stickers. We are all in this together. So my ask is, can we push this year, and can we try to figure out a good timeline?
Jamie, let me just see if I can help you out. Right now, we're getting information. Even months ago, we've already started talking about this process, and we're pretty much, the board is under agreement. Nothing is going to go through until next year, because it takes so long to get a Board of Health regulation put forth and made law. So right now, I can't speak for the board, but I'm just going to say right now, you're good for this year. I'm not sure how quickly this is going to be done, but it will not be, as far as I'm concerned. I'm the chair, but I don't want to speak for the board. But we're not voting on it. But we're just looking for information. We have to do this. We need to have at least 2 to 3 different meetings to get the information we need. So right now, June 10th, next meeting's in July. So you're going to be all set for this off the books. You're going to be all set for this year. But I'm not sure what you're talking about, 8 or 10. Is that per person for your house?
So I was saying on the septic. So I appreciate you saying for this year. That makes me feel good.
Yeah, I just what you're looking at. Okay, I have a house that I rent too, a 3-bedroom house with a couch. So you're looking at basically that could be 6 to 7 people. If it's for 1 week, if you're not going to have overloading, we're not people police. We're not going to go in there and tell you, if you got this 1 week, you're going to have 10 people in it, you can't rent to them. That's not what we do. We're trying to make sure your septic system is going to be fine. That's what our purview is. That's what we want to do.
And my point between the 10 and the 8 is, I want to do everything right. I'm a good neighbor. I'm a good person. I want to do it right. So if I think that I can handle 10 and I find out now that it's like, no, you're an 8. You're a 4-bedroom. You're an 8 or whatever we said earlier. I just want to know that, so I'm advertising correctly, so that I'm telling my customers that they can't come. So just the timing of when we come up with a decision needs to be thought as well. So I'm glad to hear this year's off the table, but just if we can keep that in mind, because you need us to be able to have time to do the right thing. Because if I find out in June and people are already coming, I've done it wrong without even knowing. That's my point.
All right. Hillary, do you want to comment at least something on that? If you could, or Nick,
well,
I don't like to speak for the board.
Ken?
Go ahead, Nick.
No, I was just going to say, for Jamie, technically, if he's a 4-bedroom, he has 8 occupants. I mean, that's just basically what it is right now. I mean, we're not going to people police, but the septic system is designed for 8 people. That's all I'm going to say.
Well, it's designed for water per day.
Gallons per day.
Yeah, based on 8 people. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
110 gallons a day. So I think the whole notion of having to debate whether it's going to be a 10 or an 8, well, it's an 8.
Yeah, that's fine.
I was just going to weigh in. Well, I don't think it's realistic to get a regulation in place in time for this summer. We may have it to a place where we can open up the registration so folks can start registering if that's the will of the board before next season. I mean, we don't even have a fee established yet, but I'm just thinking the sooner we can get something, if that's what the board so desires, then the sooner we can open it up to folks to begin that process. Now, what that looks like today, I don't think any of us know because we're still evaluating the comments that are coming in. But as far as I'm concerned, the sooner we can agree on something, or maybe that something is nothing, then the sooner we can all move forward and start the process. So.
Thank you.
Ken, can I ask one question?
Go ahead.
When in the future are we going to address COVID?
Say it again. I'm sorry, Nick.
When in the future are we going to address COVID in relationship to rentals this year?
Well, be our next meeting, I guess.
Okay, I just was curious. I don't know if Hillary had any plan about
talk about it.
Very germane. I mentioned it already, but because I have specific.
I think, Nick.
Yes.
You can speak. I think that we're as of now following in phase 2, following Governor Baker's guidelines for the Massachusetts Department of Health.
Well, I understand that. I mean, he's still recommending, 14-day quarantine. And I think
for out of state, yes, for people coming in from out of state.
Exactly. And
Right.
I know this isn't pertinent to this meeting specific about registration, but the virus, last year we had people from 48 different states in Wellfleet, as per license plates, from 48 different states. Right now, there are 21 or 20 states that are having problems with COVID, with increasing numbers. And I think if we just open up right now, I know it's not for this meeting, but something for us to think about in the very near future. I think we're putting ourselves at risk. So that's for another discussion. Okay.
All right, Rebecca, anybody next?
Yep, I have Pam Grandin. I'm going to unmute her. Go ahead, Pam. You should be unmuted.
Good afternoon. Thank you all for this opportunity. I will say that I did send a letter to Hillary. I will not read my letter since a lot of it has at least been brought up, but I will defer to Hillary to maybe pull out anything else that she finds of value. I just wanted to say a couple things. I am a part-time resident. I happen to rent a few weeks every year. I have chosen not to do that this year for personal reasons. And I have to say that I do appreciate processes that start early. I'm just concerned that a couple of weeks ago, Hillary said to the select board that she wasn't ready to begin this rental registration process with everything else that's going on. Mr. Hort said that he had requested the state registry list to be able to reach out to the short-term rentals to help them understand what their obligations are for when guests come this summer. And then a week later, the Board of Health was reviewing the regulations and the application during their meeting and then talking about scheduling a public meeting. And Hillary, I understand the ease of having a registry with all that contact information. So when you deal with complaints or whatever. So I'm wondering in the short term, is there a way to use that state registry to contact the owners, maybe with a simple letter or the self-certification form to get that contact information? And then to also maybe know who else is out there that hasn't registered with the state, but not if you're using that state registry. I'm just very confused by this meeting in general because it's very unclear to me what problem is trying to be solved in the first place. I've heard health and safety, I've heard water quality, I've heard leveling the playing field between hotels and short-term rentals, and that is a completely different discussion if anybody wants to get into that one. I just feel that given the timing of other things that's going on right now that has, everybody's thoughts, maybe focusing on gathering information could be moved back a few months into the year so that we can get through this season that we're dealing with right now. So thank you.
Hillary, I can't speak for you, but probably it was me that you're probably talking about, like the hotel, whatever. To me, this registration process has been 10 years in the making. Just because I felt like anybody who, and I still feel that I hate regulation, but the playing field should be even across the board for everybody. So that's my comment upon that. Does anybody else have a comment upon?
Well, can I just respond to that? Because there's so many ways the field is not level, especially with the lodging tax that went in last year. We as private homeowners are taxed at such a higher rate than hotels, motels even start at. So that's a big discussion later.
I can't comment upon that. I don't agree with the different tax rate, but that's not my purview. That's not where I am. Basically, we're dealing with the registration for and what we can do about the water quality in town. So, Hillary, do you want to comment any more about
I had a comment on the information from the state. We still haven't seen that as the Board of Health, so we have no idea in what format that comes, if it comes with contact information, if it doesn't. So once we see that, we'll have more information.
Okay, thank you. Rebecca is next.
John Wolf. Hang on one sec. Go ahead, John. You should be unmuted.
Okay. First of all, I want to thank the board for taking the time to do this. I serve on a town board too, the Marina Advisory Committee, so I know that I'm well aware of the time commitment and the energy that goes into it. And I wouldn't want you to think that it's unappreciated. I just want to bring up a couple of points. I spoke briefly with the building department and was advised that anytime a change is made to a septic, such as upgrading from a cesspool to a Title V, a permit is pulled and it is part of the town record. So that information should be available. As far as the who is actually renting short term, now that we are registered with the state, or we're supposed to be, that information should be available from the state by this time. Third of all, hello, as part of the
get back on.
Hello,
is there a time limit on this? We've been like 2 hours.
Hey Nick,
can I finish?
Yeah, go ahead, John. Keep going.
Getting Zoom.
Well, somebody's trying to interrupt, so
I guess I'm out.
As far as the tax goes, 2.75% of the tax of that 12.45% tax is earmarked for wastewater issues as it stands now. And I don't think that's been brought out in the discussion, but that does happen to be the case. And I myself have no objection to furnishing the Board of Health with information concerning what my rental, how many people, and so forth. I understand the need for that, and I want to make it clear that I'm not pushing back on this just because I'm opposed to some kind of regulation. I understand the need, and I appreciate the job that the Board of Health does for the town, and I want to help. So I just wanted to make that clear. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Appreciate it. Rebecca, or anybody else?
Suzanne Gray. I'm going to unmute her. Go ahead, Suzanne. You should be unmuted.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Just two brief points. One is that I do pay taxes on rental income to the feds and the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. So I do treat it as a business, as I'm sure other people do as well. I also have a major concern about the affordable rentals and workforce housing and how it would affect that. And I won't repeat what I said in my email, but basically what I'm saying is please work with the other committees in town to make sure we're not adversely affecting our workforce housing. My third thing is that Tommy Jacobs Ziobro has had hand up for a long time and has not been recognized because she doesn't know how to put her hand up on the Zoom part. She's been putting it up on a sign.
I did see your hand up. So, Rebecca, do you see Tommy?
I see her right here. Hang on, I'll unmute her. Go ahead, Tommy.
Thank you. I've done this many, many times, and for some reason I couldn't find a place to put my hand up. So I even went in and out trying to. Anyway, I'm Tommy. I'm a year-round resident, and I did. Thank you very much, Suzanne. I did want to just voice my husband and I's opposition to the regulation in its present form. And I had some questions. So I had a question. Some numbers have been thrown around, and that is, how much income has the town of Wellfleet received in the past year from the taxes that were assessed? I know it's not a full year, but that were assessed last year. Does anybody know? I mean, because $1 million were thrown out there.
Hillary, have you got that information? Or does anybody have that information?
I don't even have the information on who's registered with the state, so I clearly don't have any information on the amount of money it's
yeah, it just seems like that. It seemed like this was a fee gathering thing from my first read of it. After listening to you, I see that that's not the case.
Right.
So I do think the fee is prohibitive. And my question is, how much does it cost to have your septic system inspected every 3 years as well too? And then I was also curious, how many complaints from renters do you as the Board of Health receive on a yearly basis? Is it a great number? Because I know that, through the agency that we use, we can get complaints, we get reviewed. We can make complaints about the renters, but I wondered how many you actually get through the Board of Health at this point in time.
So just for instance, last week alone, I got 2 complaints about housing matters. So that was last week. It's different week to week, month to month. I do keep a complaint log, and, I could go back through that and get an actual number for you. But I would say in a year, we probably have, at least 3 handfuls of housing complaints. But sometimes it's more, sometimes it's less.
And are they usually from renters, or are they from neighbors?
So it ranges the gamut. So we get them from actual, in the summertime, we obviously get more complaints from actual renters. And we do get a fair amount of complaints from neighbors as well about rental units.
Okay. I think this has been voiced, but I would think that it's very important, and I'm asking the question, will there be further public this topic? Because, again, my husband would have liked to have been here, but he was at work at this time. If it was in person, he possibly would have taken the day off to come to it.
Anytime the Board of Health talks about anything, it has to be in a public hearing format. So we generally meet the second Wednesday of every month. We haven't met in person in a very long time, but our meetings are noticed on the town calendar. So certainly keep your eye peeled to that. And sometimes we meet outside of that second Wednesday. So I would say, continue to watch the town calendar.
Okay. Hillary.
That was the main thing. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, Tommy. Hillary, there's one thing that I was kind of like questioning about. All depends on kind of what the cost would be. Do you have any idea what it costs for a septic inspection?
So a septic inspection can range from, $400 up to $800.
Yeah, so I was kind of wondering the cost of when somebody gets the initial inspection done, if it could run for like 2 cycles, like for 6 years instead of getting it done every 3 years. You know what I mean? So,
I mean, we could
that'd
have
be things that we could stuff we could keep continually discuss.
for sure.
Okay. Is anybody else, Rebecca?
Yep, I have Marie.
I have a few letters from folks that I don't know if they're on or not that I just want to get into the record. So if I could just take this opportunity to get those going, because there's a few of them.
Yep, go ahead.
Okay, so this one is from Artie Parker, and he's writing to the Wellfleet Select Board, but it was forwarded to us. It says, "Good morning. I urge you not to pass the proposal by the Board of Health to institute a registration requirement for short-term rental properties as it is unnecessary and will put yet another financial burden on the taxpayers of town. We're not Provincetown. This is another example of fixing a problem that does not exist. Thank you for your consideration, Artie." The next one comes from a Robert Arosus, and that says, "Dear Wellfleet Board of Health, I thank you for your service to the town. I have reviewed the proposed Wellfleet regulation for short-term rentals. The Board of Health rental certificate registration will follow Mass State Sanitary Health Codes for rental and owner-occupied units. The premise conforms to the requirements of 105 CMR 410, minimum standards of fitness for human habitation. The code is written for owner, occupancy, and rental units. I do not see where it includes short-term rentals. For example, the requirements require screens on all exterior doors and must provide heat and outlines corrective timeframes for landlords. Are these codes intended for tenants staying 1 or 2 weeks in the summer? Please explain how these guidelines are realistic. In the Wellfleet specific regulation, the property owner is responsible for finding a comparable unit. If any rental certificate is suspended or revoked, the owner or manager of the premise shall be responsible for finding alternative comparable housing. Please point out in the state guidelines which requires that for short-term rentals, is it practical for a property owner to find a 7-day tenant another comparable unit in the middle of a busy summer season? For example, how are property owners supposed to find a comparable unit on August 1st? I believe the Wellfleet Board of Health, as well as the health department across Massachusetts and the country, determine number of bedrooms via the size of the septic system. Those certifications are filed at the Board of Health. Now it appears that we will have to find another way to measure number of people allowed to sleep in a house, even if for a short period of time. Are infants and toddlers defined as another occupant? Clearly, it is already in the best interest of homeowners to limit the number of people allowed in the house, and we do limit the number of people. We don't want our houses overused, nor our septic system stressed. We have a septic system that can be used for a 2, 3, or 4 bedroom that's been inspected and is on file. And now there will be another system of measuring square footage to determine occupancy for 7 or 14-day stays. If the septic system was inspected 2 years ago, all was fine and filed with the Board of Health. Do I need to get another one? How often? And practically speaking, how will everyone who rents be able to get a septic inspection with such high demand? This proposal in its current form is overreaching and unreasonable. The criteria used in 410-180 does not even make sense for short-term rentals. Clearly, this was pushed to get into place for the season. I ask that you vote this down or table the certification process in its entirety so it can be properly vetted, reviewed, and discussed. Then we have the letter from Pam. Pam was on the line and spoke to you live. This comes from Rowan McVeigh. Hello, I'm contacting you because I have a concern with how minimum square footage section of the proposed short-term rental registration regulation is worded. The document states that the minimum square footage regulation is to be based on the state sanitary code, but there's a discrepancy between how the Wellfleet regulation is worded and how the state regulation is worded. The proposed Wellfleet regulation states in a dwelling unit, every room occupied for sleeping purposes by one occupant shall contain at least 70 square feet of floor space, and every room occupied for sleeping purposes by more than one occupant shall contain at least 50 square feet for each additional occupant. Asterisk around the word additional. The way it is worded, it sounded like 120 square feet is required for a double occupancy room, 70 for the first and 50 for the second. The mass regulation is in a dwelling unit, every room occupied for sleeping purposes by one occupant shall contain at least 70 square feet of floor space. Every room occupied for sleeping purposes by more than one occupant shall contain at least 50. Therefore, using the state's calculation, a double room is required to be 100 square feet. This is a critical difference in room size, and I believe the Wellfleet proposed regulation should be amended to match the state. Thanks, Rowan. This email comes from Mary Ann Thomas. This email is directed to the Wellfleet Board of Health regarding proposed short-term rental regulations, fees, and certifications. While I understand that a number of Cape Towns adopted rules, regulations, and fees when the mass occupancy tax became law, Wellfleet did not propose or enact such legislation. Raising the issue now, as our rental season has just opened, creates discord and confusion among short-term rental owners in the community. Adding a $300 fee on top of existing mass occupancy taxes puts further stress on property owners at a difficult economic time. I urge you to delay discussion on this important issue until the fall, when adequate time has passed for Wellfleet short-term rental property owners to review and comment. A 1 p.m. meeting tomorrow gives little time for full discussion and participation. Additionally, if these regulations are adopted tomorrow, there are serious concerns regarding adequate town resources to inspect and monitor short-term rental property. Thoughtful, timely deliberation with as much community input as possible is the best way to go forward. Thank you for your consideration, Mary Ann Thomas. This comes from Allison Flynn. Dear Remos and the Board of Health members, we respectfully request that you consider amending the draft regulations to include an effective date of September 1, 2020, to require property owners to further delay honoring short-term leases until the Board of Health can issue a certificate would be untimely and unduly burdensome. We ask that kindly note this request as public comment at the regulation hearing on June 10th. Thank you in advance. This comes from Lynn of VIP Real Estate. Hi, Hillary. Registering landlords, we have enough to deal with this year. Between being frozen on rentals, dealing with extra cleaning, it is certainly not the year and not the time to give us another huge challenge to get landlords to register. Thank you. From Terry Galvin. Dear members of the board, you can add my name to the list of year-round Wellfleet residents who feel this is a terrible time to add one more layer of bureaucracy to town government. Rental property owners, along with everyone else, are already reeling from the uncertainty brought on by COVID-19 pandemic. The loss of income from rental cancellation coupled with additional fees will force some owners to put their houses up for sale, to raise their rental fees on short-term renters and year-round renters as well. We wring our hands over the lack of affordable housing for young people in Wellfleet, yet continue to make housing more expensive with every additional fee. I do not hear many complaints about some standard housing here. I think on balance, most property owners do a good job of taking care of their property as it is in their I think this proposal should be brought up at town meeting. Let the voters decide if this is a good fit for Wellfleet. Thank you, Terry Galvin. Suzanne, we have a part 1 and a part 2 from you. Are you good with yours? I think Suzanne's trying to talk to us, but she's muted.
Yep, hold on. I'll get her.
She's the last one. And then I have one more from Janet. So let's hear from Suzanne, and I'll go grab Janet off the...
I think I'm unmuted now.
Yep, you're good.
Thank you. It's a multi-step process. And basically the points that I made have been covered. My concern, as I've said before, is also not just with the short-term burden on the short-term rentals, but also the burden for affordable housing. And I really would like you to get other groups involved in this and talk through with the Wellfleet Housing Authority, et cetera, what their feelings are and how many units they feel in town might not conform to these standards. And that's a huge concern for me. Thank you.
Okay, and then I have from Janet Reinhardt. As you know, I am in favor of this. We have to tread lightly and slowly. We need to register rentals for the reasons you stated. It would also be good for getting a handle on water quality, low to moderate income housing, and revenue. Some possibilities. A tax credit could be offered to those renting a room or section for lower income people. It could also count towards our affordable housing stock. Those dealing in cash may find the benefit to the town, and the idea that they are helping may be good. Fears. Septic upgrade is costly. Water testing could find expensive problems. I think with input, we could make it palpable to everyone. I'll be at the meeting, but blah, blah, blah. Okay, so that's what we got as far as comment letters.
Okay, thank you, Hillary. Rebecca, do you have anybody else?
I have 2 more. Maria, you should be unmuted.
renting for 4 weeks and the whole stay for the entire season or year, 4 weeks, how would that affect anybody's water quality or septic systems? The thing is that I only have like 4 weeks used, and year-round rentals use it all year round. And also, how about we start a movement to tell all Wellfleet renters not to rent for 2 years? And maybe then the town will see how much they need us. It's the vacationers that pay your bills. Mr. Town people, all the restaurants, all the theaters, and all the stores, they pay you guys taxes from the money that they get from the vacationers. We rent our house too. Leave us alone. And you should have everybody that owns in town vote on it, whether they're a Wellfleet resident or not, or a Massachusetts resident. It's too much government. Strangles the economy to death.
I don't know if you can.
Thank you very much.
Okay, we have one last one, and then I think if you guys can discuss or we can end. Hang on one second. Jamie is next. Jamie, I'm going to unmute you.
Yeah,
You should be unmuted.
Just a quick question. I don't get the gentleman's name that jumped in and said, "Oh, you're an 8 because you have a 4-bedroom septic." I have a 3-bedroom septic with 1-bedroom studio, and so we have this language that's around square footage. So where do I find the clear-cut answer of what I am and what I'm not? You know, I'm not trying to be. I'm just trying to figure it out. If it was so simple as doubling the bedroom by the Title V, then why do we need that verbiage around square footage? So that's why I don't know what I'm at or where I would stand. So who do I ask these questions to, and what is the ruling? And maybe there's a forum for sending emails for questions. I don't know.
Anybody want to tackle that? No. Well, basically, you know, when your septic system is designed when it's put in the ground for your bedrooms, you know, that's basically designed, say, a year-round use. That's what it's supposed to be averaged as. So, if you're, you know, I can't say yes or no for you can put 10 people in there because I just don't like to. I don't like to say that. You know, but if you're going to just have somebody come down for a week rental and they got an extra person in there, we're not going to give you a hard time about that. Now, if you were renting your house for an entire year and you had 20 people in there, we would have issues with that. But if you're just renting it for a week, you got 10 people in there for a week. Next week you go down to 8. We're not going to be busting your ass. So that's all I can say. I don't know if anybody wants to say anything else, but I can.
Go ahead. So it's 2 different regulations that are sort of getting blurred into one. The housing code, 105 CMR 410, calculates occupants by size of bedrooms. So that's one. Number 2 is Title V is designed for the number of bedrooms in your house. And Title V assumes, and that's an assumption, that there are 2 occupants per bedroom. So the true ruling on the number of people in the dwelling would actually go to the housing code, not Title V. So Title V will tell you the number of bedrooms you can have. The housing code tells you the number of occupants you can have.
Hope that helps.
So that's, and I feel like I'm a builder. I build, I pull permits. I know what's going on. It's confusing. So what are we going to have the determining factor? You know what I mean? And so and again, you're saying, oh, we're not going to be the police, but if I'm going to lose my beach sticker, or if I'm going to get a ticket, or if I'm going to get written up, then I need to know where I stand. I can't have it. Well, it's a rule, but not a rule, because I don't feel comfortable with that. You know, I want to do what's right. So we need to make it so that we can not be like, well, he said it was okay, or she said it was, yeah, we're not going to call you. Like, okay, so then let's go by the square footage and forget about the septic. But then maybe, that's not what we want to do. So.
Can I ask you a question? The square footage settles your question. Can you have 10 people by the square footage?
Yeah, listen, again, this might actually help me. Whatever the answer is, I just need to know the answer so I can start advertising for those folks. At the end of the day, the people will tell me if I'm overpriced or they want to come to our town anymore. So, so I'm not trying to slip one by. I think 10 is a little bit better because of a child or an infant or something like that. Like, if you were to see my setup, you'd be pleasantly surprised. 10 would be like, oh, Jamie, no, you're not an issue. I feel like that's not the problem. I just don't want to wing it. And then all of a sudden, I'm in violation. I'm a bad neighbor. I am getting a ticket. I am losing my beach because I just won't rent anymore. I love this town too much. I love this house too much. Forget it. However, I just want to know what the right thing is. So that's why, that's the clarity I would want.
Well, come back to our next meeting. We'll be talking about this again.
I don't know, man. I'm like hour 7 out of 2 days. I don't know how you guys do this, man.
Oh, come on. You can hang out with us,
I would love to hang out, but last night was 4 hours. Today is 3. You guys are doing God's work, man.
Hey, all I can say is, that's about it.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad we're not doing it this year. I will participate in clarity with enough time so that we can do the right thing.
Well, again, Jamie, that's why we're doing this now. We're doing this now to get the information that we need to move forward. We have a beautiful town. That's the way we want to keep it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, Janet, you got your hand up. Go ahead. Oh, you got to be unmuted.
Okay. I just want to say that it's comments like Jamie's that are going to help us write a much clearer regulation that don't leave people, good people who are trying to follow the rules in a
Exactly.
So thank you very, very much. That was the whole purpose of today. The whole purpose of today was not to institute a regulation, not to make it happen for this rental season, not to overcharge people or help or hurt anyone in affordable housing. The whole purpose was to gather information. So the good, the bad, all of the information is so appreciated that you all took the time and we all took the time to listen to.
Happy to do it. I mean, I find it appalling that paint stores don't take paint back because there's no way to dispose it. You sold me the paint, you should take it back. But of course, people are going to legally dump paint. Like, what do you think's going to happen next? So I'm a big fan of that. I pull a permit because that just requires that you do it the right way. That's all that permit's doing. The $100 is nothing, for the most part. So I'm all for it, but we need to give the people a chance to do the right thing.
Right.
And again, last night's meeting, they're like, oh, switch to 2 weeks. I'm like, it's too late for that. Like, we have the renters already. We're going to have good renters that love this town, that are prepared and been self-quarantined, not to get sidetracked. But
right. No, and also I want to just add an addendum. Again, you have a small business.
Yeah.
In your small business, you have a business plan and you know what's going to work for you and what's not going to work for you.
Yeah.
You also now have from Governor Baker a COVID plan that you're going to integrate into that business plan. So the Board of Health is very respectful for all the work that the state and Governor Baker has done with epidemiologists and science to help develop the best guidelines for short-term rentals. So we know that we want to keep our visitors and their loved ones who come here safe, well, and happy. So we're right in that same boat with you. And so you have to keep doing that with a good business plan, a good COVID safety plan, and we'll all be in great shape. Thank you, Jamie.
I agree. I mean, I not in this town. Years ago, I stayed in a house that I was horrified about the electrical. I wanted to leave. If I had a kid then, I would have walked out of there. Not that my life's not valuable, but it was so. Yeah, there's a necessity. There's a need, and you can't get in every house because they haven't applied for this type of business or they haven't pulled a building permit. So I get it, but it's got to be reasonable, and you got to give people a chance to be able to follow it, and it can't be over. And the expenses, septic tank fee, all that. I get it.
Well, Jamie, thank you very much. I appreciate you being here. We'll see you next month.
Yeah, I like what you did there, Kenneth.
All right, Rebecca, what else you got?
I got 3 more. Jason, I'm going to unmute you. Go ahead, Jason.
Thank you very much. And thanks to everyone on the board. I just had a follow-up from Hillary's comment, and it sounds like the answer may just be that we don't know. But of those 2 regulations, which is the one that's actually going to determine the occupancy? And if the answer is we don't know, I would just suggest to the board that would be a very important thing to clarify.
I agree with you.
Because to Jamie's point, for those of us, who are law abiding and want to follow the regulation, we really need to know that definitively to advertise the property. It can't be a maybe. There has to be a number in the listing, and we need to know how that number is calculated. I would also suggest that, quite a bit of care go into that decision. My understanding from local real estate agents is that in Eastham, where they have a similar regulation, that determination does impact property value. So that's a lot more than a $300 fee or a $400 inspection. That's something that could significantly impact the resale value of a home. So I just think that that's something that requires some careful consideration. My last point that I would just suggest to the board is I believe, if I understood, I heard that a septic inspection is good for 3 years. I would suggest that it be clear in the regulation that a certificate that's less than 3 years old would be accepted for the initial registration. I didn't really understand the answer, if there was an answer, on how good a water inspection is for. But I would encourage the board, again, to just sort of minimize the burden during what's a difficult economic time. That if an older water certificate can be inspected and is valid, that it be accepted and that be clear in the regulation. Thank you very much for your time and the thoughtfulness that everyone's putting into this.
Thank you. Appreciate your concerns. Next, Rebecca.
All right, John Wolf, hang on. Go ahead, John, you should be all set.
Yep, very quickly. Just wanted to clear up the equivalency between, there's a difference between a small business, which I am in fact running with my little rental cabin, because I declare taxes. I pay income tax to the state and the feds, and also the state rooms tax. There's a difference between that small business and an occupation, such as a motel. If I owned a motel, that would be my job. That would be my source of income. So those of us who are renting out these rooms and so forth, it's really not fair to say that we are in the same category as a motel. Now, that's not to take away from the need to address what you're trying to address, and I support. Because I love the town and I want to do the right thing by the town and all of us in it. And I have, like I said before, no objection to cooperating in an effort to make sure you know how many people are renting, what the status of our septic systems is, and so forth. And in that connection, I would suggest that since we all have to have these systems pumped periodically, that would be a good time to also get it inspected, and then have that certificate on hand as Jason suggested, and viable as proof of a properly operating septic. That's all I've got. Thank you.
Thank you, John.
All right, last one, Taylor Burkhead. I'm going to unmute you. Okay, Taylor.
Thank you. Thank you all for this venue. It's very educational. So I've kind of been listening and just wrote down a few notes. I want to thank John again for an eminently practical solution. And the more that the main issue here seems to be water, both supply and the septic end of things. So if the fees can be drastically reduced, you'll get much better compliance. So if you can really keep that in mind as you go, that would be great. A couple other random things. If you can keep Zoom meetings for your actual in-person meetings, that would help for lots of people who won't be able to be there at the moment. People police came up. We're not trying to be people police, and yet neighbors complaining about cars parked is kind of people policing, in my book anyway. If you ever get to a COVID meeting, I hope that any regulations will include a sunset clause, something along the lines of when deaths by COVID are reduced to less than those by normal viruses, then it should just go away. It should sunset claused out of there. Let's see. Right. And generally speaking, just listening to people, I would say the vote is a good 3 or 4 to 1 against. And without trying to read too much into it, if you take the professional regulators out of the equation, it's probably 10 or 20 to 1. And absolutely, vacationers pay a lot of taxes. We want to keep it easy for small folks to bring in vacationers to go buy stuff, have a good time, go to the movies, and pay their taxes and cover all the expenses. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Everybody all done, Rebecca?
You are all done, sir.
All right. Does anybody want to discuss anything more?
I'll just carry over my minutes to next time because it's been a while.
Been a while. All right. So the next meeting is scheduled for when?
Let me look. Hang on one second.
Second Wednesday in July.
So July 8th.
Okay, July 8th. Okay. All right. If there's nothing else, gonna have a motion to adjourn. Hello.
Everybody wants to.
Have a second. Okay.
Hi. I move to adjourn and look forward to Rebecca's excellent note taking on. And I took notes too, so we can compare them at our next meeting and come up with a very good plan. Thank you, everybody.
Do I have a second? All in favor? Aye.
Ed and I say aye. Hillary, yes.
Just real quick, do we still have a quorum of the Board of Health on here? Because whenever the rest of the members dropped off is when our public meeting should have stopped. And I see Ken and I see Janet. Do we still have Nick?
Nick is on here as well, yep.
Okay.
I'm trying to unmute him, but he's not letting me unmute him.
Perfect.
There we
go. All right, then we're all set.
Hillary, you did a great job.
Well, how about me?
You were okay. You were okay, Jen.
Well, thank you, Jen. I appreciate that. So,
yeah.
All right. Hey, everybody, have a good June. See you next month.
Thank you.
Okay. Take care, Ken.
Bye.
Bye.
Now, so we have 3 candidates, but this all came about because Aberdale was asked to be back on the dredging task force, and he has a very good amount of history and knowledge of dredging and funding and all the permits. So can I have a motion to appoint Joe Aberdale to the dredging task force?
I move to appoint Joe Aberdale to the dredging task force for a term ending June 30th, 2023.
Helen, second.
All in favor, say aye.
Helen, aye.
Kathleen, aye.
Christina, aye.
Michael, aye.
Aye. Motion. So we have 2 candidates, Kevin Coakley and John Wolf. And we did get, both are very qualified. I'm very impressed with what John's resume. I never knew that about him. We did get a letter from, did everybody get the letter from